The service had been at 11. By 12:30, most people had moved toward the cars, toward the church hall, toward the quiet relief of sandwiches and tea and condolence conversations that had somewhere to end. 8 of us were still standing at the grave. I was one of them. I was not ready to be anywhere else. It was February, and the ground was the particular gray-brown of winter earth that has been turned recently, and the flowers were already looking like they wouldn't last the week. I was aware of these things in the way you are aware of things when you are using observation as a way of not feeling. The white roses. The headstone that was still temporary, the proper one coming in 6 weeks. My mother's name and the dates of her life and the word beloved, which she would have thought was a bit much, but which I chose anyway because it was true and I was the one choosing. I knew everyone at the grave. Her friend Maureen from the choir, who had known my mother for 30 years and who had held my hand during the service, and who I would have to call next week when I was capable of a conversation that lasted more than 4 minutes. Father Deegan, who had known her since before I was born, and who had said all the right things, and who looked tired in the way that men who spend a lot of time around grief look tired. Her neighbor Sheila and Sheila's husband, whose name I always forgot, and who always reminded me with the patient kindness of a man who knew he was forgettable. A woman from the Library Guild whose name I knew but couldn't access just then, and one person I did not know. He was standing at the far edge of the group, slightly apart, which I initially read as courtesy, the formal acquaintance giving room to the closer ones. He was in his early 70s, I thought. A dark coat that was good quality, slightly too formal for a February graveside in this weather, the kind of coat you wear when you want to be dressed correctly for something that matters. His jaw was set in the way that jaws set when their owner has decided they are not going to cry. I have seen this look. I have done this look. He was not succeeding entirely. His eyes were doing what eyes do when permission has been withheld, but the need hasn't gone away. I thought, wrong funeral. It happens. Someone who saw the notice in the paper and arrived at the right church at the wrong time, or the right time for the wrong service. I was going to wait for a moment and then go over to him gently and ask if I could help. He turned. He looked directly at me. Not at the group, at me. And he said my name. Not the short version. Not the name I have used since I was 12 and decided the long version was too much for daily use. He said the full version. The one on my birth certificate. The one my mother chose. The one she used on the rare occasion she needed to make clear something was not a request. He said it the way you say something you have been holding for a very long time. Quietly, carefully, like setting something fragile down on a surface you're not sure will hold it. Then he looked away. He walked toward the car park. I lost him behind the line of parked cars, and I did not see his face clearly at any point. And when I walked to the edge of the car park a minute later, there was a gray car pulling out, and I could not see the plates, and I did not see him again. My mother told me my father died before I was born. She told me this for 41 years. She was a precise woman. She chose her words. She did not say things carelessly, and she did not say things she did not mean. She took whatever else she knew to her grave last Thursday. And I am starting to think that was not an accident. Let me go back a little. My mother's name was Eileen, and she was 73 when she died, which is not old enough. And she had spent 43 of those years as the entirety of my family. It was always just us. I grew up understanding this in the uncomplicated way that children understand the architecture of their lives. It was not strange because it was all I had ever known. Other children had fathers. We did not. Our family had a different shape. The story, as I understood it, was straightforward. They had been together briefly. He had died before I was born in an accident before they could marry. She had been alone from that point. She had made a life, and the life was a good one, and she had not remarried because she had not wanted to, and she had raised me in the same parish house I grew up in, and I had gone to the local school, and then the regional college, and then the city university, and then I had come back, because I am a person who comes back. And I had been a librarian for 14 years at the Central Library, and I had lived in a flat 20 minutes from my mother by bus, and I had gone to her house every Sunday for dinner and a puzzle. That was the shape of it. that was what I knew. She died on a Thursday, unexpectedly, which means it was a heart attack and not an illness, which means there was no period of preparation and no final conversation and nothing said that might have needed to be said. She was there on Sunday. We did the puzzle, we had dinner, I got the bus home, and then she was not there on Thursday, and I received the phone call from Sheila next door, who had found her when she didn't answer the door for the post. I arranged the funeral. I called the people who needed to be called. I met with Father Deegan. I chose the flowers and the readings and the word beloved on the temporary headstone, and I did all of it in the particular fog of early grief that is actually a kind of function. You have things to do and you do them because the alternative is not doing them, and that is worse. The fog clears later. I was not looking forward to when the fog cleared. At the graveside, I stood with Maureen and Father Deegan and Sheila and the forgettable husband and the woman from the library guild and a man I did not know who said my full name and walked to the car park. I tried to talk myself out of it. On the drive home, I had a thorough and detailed internal argument about grief and pattern matching and the specific way that unusual circumstances can make ordinary things feel significant. A man attended my mother's funeral. He was, perhaps, a former colleague, someone from years back, someone she had mentioned and I had forgotten. He knew my name because she had mentioned me, as parents do. He said the long version by accident or by habit of hearing it that way. He was moved because funerals move people. He left because funerals are hard and sometimes you need to leave quickly. This is all possible. Every part of it is possible. I ran it as a theory for approximately 4 days before I started searching. I am a librarian, 14 years at the Central Reference Desk. My job, the actual daily content of my job, is helping people locate things, in catalogs, in archives, in the particular uncatalogued territory between what the system says it holds and what it actually holds. I know about absence. I know that what is not in the catalog is sometimes as important as what is. I know the difference between a gap that exists because the record was never created and a gap that exists because someone decided not to create it, or created it differently, or put it somewhere it would not easily be found. My mother was precise. She chose her words. She said my father died before I was born. She did not say he died before I was born here, in this city, in this country. She said he died, past tense, definitive. I searched for a death record, his name, the year she would have been with him, the general region she had indicated through small stories told over the years, a coastal town somewhere, a summer, before she moved to the city permanently. This is what I had. I put it into every search I knew, and I know a great many searches. I found nothing that fit. I expanded. Adjacent years, variant spellings, adjacent regions. I found a man with a similar name who had died in the wrong decade. I found a death record that matched on one detail and not on the others. I found the ordinary noise of partial records and incomplete digitization, which I know well. I have explained archive gaps to patrons many times. The specific kinds of absence that come from rural papers not yet digitized, from records damaged or misfiled, or simply never completed in the first instance. I told myself this for a week. Archive gap, incomplete digitization. It does not necessarily mean anything that I cannot find the record. Absence is not evidence. I know this professionally. Then I searched again, differently, a week after the first search. Different databases, a different approach to the name. I still did not find what I was looking for. When you search for something in a library archive and you cannot find it, you consider several explanations. The record doesn't exist because it was never created. The record exists but hasn't been digitized. The record has been misfiled, or the event that the record should document did not happen the way you were told it happened. That last one. I kept putting it down and it kept coming back. I wrote it in the notes document I had started keeping on my laptop, the one I titled simply, Search Notes, as though naming it anything else would make it too real. Father's name not confirmed in death records for stated year, stated region, or adjacent. Archive gap possible. Other explanations possible. I stopped writing and looked at the words for a while. Then I went back to work. A patron needed help locating a run of local newspapers from the 1980s, and I found them for her, and I helped her navigate the microfilm reader. And I answered 2 reference inquiries by email, and I reshelved the trolley of returns. I am good at my job. My job does not require me to have a resolved personal life. 3 weeks after the funeral, I went to clear my mother's house. I had been putting it off. I knew I needed to do it. Sheila had been kind about watching the place, and my mother had owned it outright, so there was no urgency from a tenancy perspective. But it had been sitting there empty for 3 weeks, and I needed to go in and begin, and it was going to be hard, and I was going to do it anyway. The house smelled like her. I noticed this as soon as I opened the door. That specific combination of her particular soap, the drawer sachets she used, the faint trace of the tea she drank every evening. I stood in the doorway for a moment. The smell was already beginning to thin, the way smells do when the person who makes them is no longer there to replenish the source. And I was aware that in some weeks or months, it would be gone. And I did not write this down anywhere or say it out loud. I went in and I started with the kitchen, because the kitchen was practical and practical was what I needed. The kitchen took 2 hours. I kept everything useful. I boxed the rest for the charity shop. I found, in the back of the cutlery drawer, a birthday card I had given her when I was 9, a drawing of a cake with too many candles, the inside written in my 9-year-old handwriting that I found I could still recognize. I put it in the bag I had brought for things I was keeping. The living room was harder. The puzzle table was still set up, the last completed puzzle sitting there, 1,000 pieces, a seascape, finished 3 months ago on one of our Sundays. She had done the edges first, the way she always did. I looked at it for a while. I picked up one piece from the upper left corner, a fragment of blue sky, irregular edged, and I put it in my coat pocket without thinking about why. I did not examine the impulse. I was aware of doing it. I moved on. Her bedroom I left for last. The dresser was a dark wood piece she had owned since before I was born, the kind of furniture that outlasts everything around it. I started at the top. Brushes, a small mirror, a jewelry box that contained a pearl necklace she wore to church, and a watch that had belonged to her own mother. These went in the keeping bag. The middle drawers contained folded jumpers and blouses, which I folded further and put in the charity shop boxes. Then the bottom drawer. The bottom drawer was the accumulation drawer. Everyone has one. The place where things go that are not currently useful but cannot be discarded. A single leather glove, brown, no pair. 3 winter scarves. A collection of Christmas cards rubber-banded together. Some old postcards that had come in the post from people at various times over the years. The kind of thing that gets kept in an accumulation drawer because discarding a postcard someone sent feels wrong even when you can't remember who sent it. Under all of this, face down, a photograph. I turned it over. My mother, young, 20s from the look of it. I can place it from the clothes and the way the photograph is lit, the specific quality of the color in photographs from that period. She is standing somewhere I do not recognize, a stone wall behind her, what looks like coast, gray sky. She is looking at the camera. She is not smiling exactly, but she looks... I thought about the right word for a while, and the right word was present. She looks present. She looks like a person who is somewhere they want to be. The man next to her is not looking at the camera. He is slightly turned toward her, his face in 3/4 profile, looking at her in the way that people look at people they are interested in. Not dramatically, just attentively. He has dark hair. He is perhaps mid-30s in this photograph, I estimated. He is wearing a light jacket. I turned the photograph over. My mother's handwriting on the back. The same handwriting I had known my whole life. The careful, slanted print she used when she was being particular about something. A first name. A date from 43 years ago. A place name I did not recognize. The first name was the name the man at the grave had said when I looked at him. Not spoken. He had said my name, not his own. But it was the name I had caught somehow, or that I thought I had caught, in the way he said mine. It fit. It was the name I had been using in my search notes without being sure I had the right to use it. I put the photograph face down on the dresser. I sorted 4 more scarves. I folded them and put them in the charity shop box. I am telling you this specifically because I remember it specifically. The 4 scarves, the folding, the awareness of both the photograph face down on the dresser surface and the task directly in front of me, held simultaneously without resolving into either one. I have thought about this in the weeks since, and I think it is something about the particular human mechanism that allows you to keep doing the immediate task when the non-immediate task is too large to begin. The scarves needed folding. I folded them. The photograph needed thinking about. It would still need thinking about in 20 minutes. 20 minutes later, I picked it up. I put it in my coat pocket next to the puzzle piece. I went home. I looked up the place name. It was a coastal town, 4 hours from the city. I had never been there. My mother, as far as I knew, had never mentioned it. She had been there 43 years ago, in the summer, with a man who was in the city 2 months ago, crying at her grave, and who knew my full name. I got out my search notes document. I added, photograph found, first name confirmed, place name, coastal town, date, 43 years ago, man alive 43 years ago, man alive apparently now. I sat with the last sentence for a while, then I closed the laptop. The thing about working in a reference library is that you become accustomed to the sensation of having a piece of information that you know is real, but that does not yet connect to anything else you know. A patron brings you a fragment, a name, a date, a title they half remember, and you work with what they have. You pull at the threads. You locate the material that contextualizes the fragment. Sometimes the material confirms the fragment and the patron has what they came for. Sometimes the material complicates the fragment in ways the patron did not anticipate, and you have to help them navigate that. I am professionally equipped to navigate this. I knew this. I also knew, sitting at my kitchen table with a photograph in my coat pocket and a document of search notes on my laptop, that professional equipment is not the same as emotional equipment, and I was very short on emotional equipment and had been since the Thursday 3 weeks prior when Sheila called. I went to work. I helped people find things. I ate dinner and I went to sleep and I went to work again. I did this for several days. On the 5th day, I called an investigator. I am not, as I said, a dramatic person. I do not take large actions easily. The decision to call an investigator felt, when I made it, like a very large action, but I had been looking in the places I knew how to look, and I had found the limits of what I could find without access to things I did not have access to. And there was a man who had been at my mother's grave who knew my name. And I was 41 years old, and I was doing the arithmetic, and the arithmetic kept coming out the same. I found a firm with a reasonable website and a clear description of their services, and I called on a Wednesday afternoon from my lunch break, standing outside the library in the cold air. The woman who answered was professional and brisk, and she took my information and said someone would call me back by end of day. He called at 4:45. His name was Carney, and he had a voice that was matter-of-fact in a way I found reassuring. Not clinical, just capable. I told him what I had. The first name from the photograph, the date, the place name, a description of the man from the funeral, early 70s, dark coat, good quality, the way he had cried, the fact that he had said my name. The fact that I was looking for confirmation of identity, not of wrongdoing. The fact that I needed to know if this person was who I thought he might be. He said he would see what he could find. He said a week was a realistic time frame. He called me back in 3 days. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was at the reference desk between appointments, the quiet 20-minute period between the patron who had needed help with the parish records and the patron who had an appointment to discuss a research query. My phone buzzed, Carney's number. I looked at it for a moment. Then I answered. He had found the man. He said this first, plainly, the way you deliver a confirmed finding. He had confirmed the identity. The first name from the photograph matched a full name, and the full name matched a man in his early 70s, and this man had an address. He said, he's been in this city for most of the last 42 years. I said, this city where I am, this city. He said, Yes. I thanked him. He said he would send through the full written report. I said that would be fine. I put my phone face down on the desk. My next patron arrived in 12 minutes. I helped him with his research query. I was thorough and useful, and I found him 2 sources he had not known about, and I answered his follow-up questions, and I wished him well, and he left at 3:30. I worked until 5. I took the bus home. I made tea, and I sat at the kitchen table, and I opened the report. 42 years in this city. I had been in this city for 41 years. We had been here simultaneously, this man and I, for my entire life. I had used this city's libraries and taken this city's buses and walked these streets and attended this city's university and come back to this city when I could have gone elsewhere and never gone elsewhere because this was where I was from, and all that time, in the same city, there had been a man my mother told me had died before I was born. The arithmetic. I had been doing it for 3 days by this point, since the phone call, but seeing it laid out in the report, the 42 years, my 41 years, the overlap, it had a different weight in writing. My mother made a choice. She made it 41 years ago, and she sustained it, completely and consistently, for every year of my life and into the grave. She was precise. She chose her words. She did not say things carelessly. She had said my father died before I was born for 41 years without variance, and I had never had a reason to look more carefully at the words, and now I was looking, and the words were doing something different than they had done before. He died. She had said he died. She had not said he was dead. I know this is reaching. I know a reasonable person could tell me I am reaching, and they would be right. And it would not change the fact that the puzzle piece from her last completed puzzle was in my coat pocket, and the photograph was on my kitchen table, and the report was open in front of me, and I had a name and an address for a man who had been in this city for 42 years, and who had stood at my mother's grave and said my full name, and then walked away. I tried to call him first. I sat with my phone for 20 minutes one evening, the address in the report, the number Carney had included. I had the number up. I didn't dial. Calling felt like the wrong approach, too abrupt, too much to ask someone to receive on a phone call from a person they did not know, or did not know they knew. I put the phone down. I drove to the street a week later. I sat outside the address. It was an ordinary street of semi-detached houses, the kind that was probably built in the 60s, maintained well, with a small front garden and net curtains that probably predated him. I sat outside for 25 minutes. I did not get out of the car. I am not going to explain this more than I already have. I simply could not. Some thresholds you can see from outside and not cross. I drove home. Then I sat down and I wrote him a letter. 1 page by hand because this seemed right. A letter requires a choice to respond, which a phone call does not, and it does not put a person on the spot in the way of arriving at a door. I wrote, I know who you are. I believe I know who you are. I know you were at the funeral. I know you said my name. I have a photograph of you and my mother from 43 years ago, with your name on the back in her handwriting, and a place I have never been to, and a date from before I was born. I do not know the rest of the story. I want to know the rest of the story, if you are willing to tell me. I have no idea what I will do with whatever you tell me. I am writing this because not writing it has become impossible. I signed it with my full name, the long version, the one she gave me and that almost nobody uses anymore. I put it in an envelope, and I wrote his address, and I walked to the post box on the corner, and I posted it, and I walked home, and I ate toast, and I went to bed. I went back to work. I helped people find things. That was what I was doing when it arrived, working, standing at the reference desk between patrons, and I did not know it had arrived until I got home and found it on the mat, a white envelope, my name in handwriting I did not recognize. A return address I recognized. I left it on the kitchen table for an hour. I made dinner. I ate the dinner. Then I sat down and opened the envelope. 1 page. His handwriting. I looked at it for a while before reading, the way you look at something before you're ready to absorb what it contains. It was clear, unhurried writing, the kind that suggests someone who writes by hand regularly. He said, yes. He confirmed what I had named, the photograph, the place, the date. He said he had known my mother for a brief time when they were both younger than I am now, and that he had cared about her, and that he had not been given a choice about what came after. There was one sentence that I could see had been written and rewritten. It had the overworked quality of a sentence that has passed through many drafts, and it said that my mother had made a decision he had disagreed with and had not been able to change, and that he had carried the weight of it for 41 years. He said he would like to meet if I was willing, and he would understand completely if I was not. He said he was sorry it had taken this long, and that he knew sorry was insufficient, and probably not the right word, and that he was saying it anyway because it was what he had. I read the letter twice. Then I set it on the kitchen table next to the photograph of him and my mother at the coast, the one taken 43 years ago in a place I had never been. The man in the photograph is in 3/4 profile, looking at her. The handwriting on the letter is from a man in his early 70s who spent 20 minutes crying at a February graveside because he had made a decision to come and then had to leave quickly. I could not confirm they were the same person by looking. The photograph is 43 years old. People change in 43 years. I was going to meet him and find out. That evening was when I stayed late at the library. Not for any external reason. My shift had ended at 5. I had no professional reason to be there after 6. But I had a key, and the evening maintenance schedule meant the building was not locked until 8, and I needed to be somewhere that was mine and ordered and under my professional care. I needed to think in a space where I knew where everything was. The evening lighting in the reference section is lower than the working lights, a particular amber-tinted low that the building has had for as long as I have worked here. The energy-saving overnight setting that leaves the stacks in partial shadow and makes the reading lamps on the tables the primary light source. I know this light well. I have worked late many times. It is a light that suits careful thinking. I sat at the central reading table. I put 3 things in front of me: the investigator's report in its folder, the photograph, and the puzzle piece from my coat pocket. The fragment of blue sky from the seascape that had been there since the day I cleared the house, that had moved from my winter coat to my spring coat as the weeks had passed. I had been sitting for perhaps 40 minutes. I was not reading the report. I had read it many times. I could have quoted sections of it. I was not studying the photograph. I was sitting with the question that I had been building toward since February. My mother knew. Not in the tentative way I had been approaching it, the maybe, the archive gap, the possibly innocent explanation. She knew. The photograph was 43 years old, hidden in the bottom drawer of her dresser, with his name in her handwriting. He had been in this city for 42 years. He had been at her funeral. He had known my full name, the long version she gave me, which means she had spoken it in some context he had been present for, or spoken it to him directly, or he had known it some other way. And all of that is possible only if they had been in contact at some point, had known each other's existence, had not been as separated as the story suggested. She had told me he died before I was born. She had maintained this for my entire life. She had been precise and she had chosen her words and she had held this story with perfect consistency for 41 years, and she took it to the grave. I have a professional relationship with absence. I have spent 14 years understanding the difference between a gap that is accidental and a gap that is shaped, the specific geometry of a missing record that was deliberately not created versus the ordinary loss of a record that no one intended to lose. My mother's absence was shaped. I was certain of this now. It had a form that matched the form of a deliberate decision, held and maintained and taken to the grave. She knew. She knew he was alive. She knew he was in this city. She may not have known he would come to her funeral, but she knew he existed, and she chose, every year, every Sunday puzzle, every dinner, every ordinary interaction in which a daughter might reasonably have asked or been told, she chose not to tell me. I picked up the puzzle piece, fragment of blue sky, irregular edges, slightly worn at the corners from pocket carrying. I had taken it from the last puzzle she and I completed. The Sunday 3 months before she died. The Sunday she had found the piece she was looking for, and held it up and laughed. There it is. That specific laugh. Private, pleased, wholly herself. I had not known, that afternoon, that there were only 3 more Sundays coming. We never know how many Sundays are left. She had found the piece she was looking for. The thought arrived fully formed and sat there in the amber library light. She had found the piece she was looking for, and she had laughed, and she had fitted it into place, and I had been across the table from her, and I had not known anything. And now I was sitting in the library with the last fragment of the last puzzle, and she was gone. And the thing she had known and held and not told me had outlived her, and I was the one holding it. I am not angry at my mother. I want to be careful about this, because it is true, and it is complicated, and I am trying not to oversimplify it in either direction. I am not angry at her in the way that I might have been if I were a different person, or if she were a different person. She loved me. She raised me, alone, and she made a life that had real warmth and real care and the specific texture of being fully present for someone. The puzzles, the dinners, the 41 years of ordinary, extraordinary attention. That was real. None of what I have found has made it less real. But she made a choice for me. She decided before I was born, and then every year after, that I would not know. She decided what I needed to know about my own origins, and she held that decision, and she took it to the grave rather than opening it up, even at the end, even when she must have known that the end was coming, as ends come for everyone. She gave me everything she gave me, and she kept this one thing, and the thing she kept was mine. It was about me. It was information about where I came from. She held it because she thought, I believe, that holding it was the right way to protect me. She was my mother, and she was protecting me in the only way she knew how. But I am 41 years old, and I have been a whole person for 41 years, and the choice about what to do with this information was mine to make, and she made it for me, and I cannot ask her why. I cannot call her. I cannot sit across the puzzle table from her on a Sunday and ask her why she chose the way she chose. I cannot tell her about the photograph, about Carney's report, about the letter with the overworked sentence. I cannot tell her that I wrote back. I cannot tell her that I am going to meet him. I cannot show her what comes after any of this, and she cannot tell me what she was carrying alone for 41 years. And the conversation I need to have is a conversation I will be having with an absence for the rest of my life. There it is, she said. That laugh. I heard it, in the amber library light, with the puzzle piece in my hand. Some things you find and you hold them, and you do not know yet what to do with them. I sat for a while longer. Then I turned off the reading lamp. Then the reference section lights. I walked through the darkened stacks, which I know well enough to navigate without light, and I let myself out the side door and I walked to the bus stop and I went home. I wrote back to him the next morning. 3 words. I'd like to meet. We met at a cafe. I chose it because it was public and because I knew the layout, and because knowing the layout of a space gives me a small and probably irrational sense of having some control. And I was aware this was irrational and I wanted the control anyway. I arrived 10 minutes early. I sat at a corner table. I ordered tea I did not drink. He came in at the agreed time. He saw me before I was certain I had seen him. He paused at the door and looked toward my corner in a way that suggested he was looking for something specific. And I understood that he knew what I looked like, or had found out what I looked like. And I filed this and did not speak to it directly. He sat down. He was wearing a different coat from the graveside, a navy one, less formal, the kind worn by someone who is trying to say, this is not a formal occasion. He had gray hair and the specific quality of tiredness that is not the tiredness of one bad night, but of something carried over time. Within 10 minutes, I had confirmed what I needed to confirm. Not through anything he said explicitly. He was careful, thoughtful, clearly someone who had spent a great deal of time thinking about how to have this conversation. But there were things only someone who had known my mother could know. Specific small things. The kind of knowledge that you have about someone only if you have known them closely. And he had this knowledge. And the weight of it was real. And I knew. He told me one thing about my mother that I did not know. He told it to me quietly, at a corner table in a cafe, over tea I was not drinking. He said it the way you say something that has been held for a very long time, and that you have been given, finally, a place to put. I am not going to tell you what it was. I have tried, several times, to find a way to include it in this account, to render it in language that would be fair to all 3 of us, to her, to him, to me. and I have not found that language. It belongs to the space between my mother and me, which is a space that now has no living person on one side of it, and I am still learning how to tend to a space like that. It is mine. What I will tell you is that it changed how I understand her, and that I am not yet certain whether the change is toward better understanding or toward something more complicated that does not have a clean name. I am working on it. I expect to be working on it for a long time. He and I have met twice since. I do not know what we are to each other. I do not have a word for it yet, and I have not tried to find one. He is a person who knew my mother before I was born, and who has been in the city for 42 years, and who stood at a grave in February and said my full name and then had to walk away. He is a person who wrote a letter with one overworked sentence and who sat across from me at a cafe and told me something about my mother I did not know. I am a person who went looking when I could have looked away and chose not to look away. What that makes us to each other is a question I am leaving open. I think it should be left open. Some things need time before you can name them, and trying to name them too early closes off possibilities you might have wanted. My mother's house cleared. It took 6 weeks in total. The proper headstone went up in March, her name and the dates and the word beloved. I stood in front of it and read it, and I thought it was right. She was beloved. She is. These things do not end with the person. The puzzle table in the living room was the last thing. I had gone back to it many times without doing anything about it. The completed seascape sitting there, all 1,000 pieces in place, the edges done first the way she always did them. Eventually, I took it apart. I took it apart carefully, section by section, the way she had built it, and I put the pieces back in the box. The hole where the fragment of blue sky had been was still there, had been there all along. I had taken a piece from a completed puzzle, and the hole had been there every time I looked, and I had not registered it until the last visit. The box went to the charity shop. The house went on the market. It sold in May to a young couple with a small child who had looked at it twice and seemed to love it in the uncomplicated way that young people love a place they are about to fill with their own life. I signed the papers. I drove away. I did not drive past it again. I went back to the grave twice after the funeral. Once in March, alone, early on a Saturday morning before most people were about. I stood at the headstone. I did not say anything out loud. The conversation I was having was internal and probably will be internal for the rest of my life. And that is all right. The second time was in May, after I had met with him for the second time. After I understood the thing he had told me with more clarity than I had the first time I heard it. I was there for perhaps 10 minutes. I left when I felt I had been there long enough, which is not a precise measure, but is the only one available. I still work at the library. This is unchanged. I am at the reference desk on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, and all day Wednesday and alternate Fridays. And I help people find things, and I know where the gaps are, and I know the difference between an absence that is accidental and one that has a shape. I have known this for 14 years. The knowledge now has a dimension it did not have before February, and I am integrating that. It is slow work. Most important work is. There is a patron I have helped several times over the past few months. A woman in her 60s who is researching her family history. The specific kind of research that opens into longer and longer questions the further back you go. The kind where each answer generates 2 new inquiries. She is methodical and she is patient, and she has a particular quality of attention that I recognize. The attention of someone who has decided that the looking itself matters, regardless of what they find. Last week she asked me, how you know when you have found what you were looking for. She meant it as a practical question about research methodology. I told her the practical answer, that you triangulate, that you confirm through multiple independent sources, that you establish a threshold of evidence that you decide in advance will be sufficient. She nodded. She went back to her material. I went back to the desk. Between patrons, I put my hand in my coat pocket. The puzzle piece was there. Fragment of blue sky, irregular edges, slightly worn. It has been in my pocket since February, moving from coat to coat as the seasons have changed. It is October now. I do not know where it goes. Some things you carry until you know where they go, and some things you carry for longer than you expected, and the carrying is not the same as not knowing. I know what it is. I know where it came from. I know the hands that fitted the piece beside it into place, and the laugh that went with the finding. I just don't know yet what to do with it. I expect I will know when I know. My mother would have found a place for it by now. She was always methodical, always purposeful, always better than I am at the practical disposition of things. But she is not here, and I am finding my own way through it in the time I have, which is what any of us can do.